Hello, my name is Joel Thornton. In this lecture we will be covering the final stages for modeling a realistic human hand in Autodesk Maya 2012. In this lecture we will cover first some extended shaping of your mesh, ranging from just pulling vertices to using the soft selection to using the Sculpt geometry tool. After that we will apply UV coordinates to the model and explore image-based modeling using displacement mapping and normal mapping. And after that I will show you three different techniques for posing your hand, ranging from just pulling vertices or rotating vertices to using lattices to finally just a basic skeletal setup for establishing poses. That's it. So without further ado, let's get started. Here we have the hand where we left off from the last video. Basically it's our low polygon hand with the correct edge parameterization. I did some further scaling of my hand to make it have more realistic human proportions. That reference image, as good as it is for just showing the underlying bone structure of the hand, the artist who drew it actually made the fingers too long. So if you think your fingers are too long, they probably are. So my recommendation is always to use that as the reference to build your base mesh, but then you as the artist, of course, have to tweak it from there once you have it technically sound. So I've already done that to photo reference that I have of a human hand, and that's it. So currently this thing is pretty low poly. It's probably only I don't know, maybe 1,000 or so. Let's just go ahead and check. Go to display, polygons, hold on, heads up display, poly count. And I just want to check out how many polygons there are. So there's 2,100 tris and 1,000 quads. So that's pretty light. For modern game engines this would probably actually work. And then if we smooth it here, we can see that we've got a decent organic form. If I were really going to finish this off, I'd probably spend a lot more time on it, but this will work for lecture purposes. Okay, so I want to go back to my control cage, and I showed you previously that this is probably not enough detail in order to get, say, the tendons back down the back of the fingers. So we only have one edge, and that's really not sufficient to get some of the medium level details that we still want to model into the mesh before we actually get into the high frequency details with the displacement mapping. So what you want to do is you probably would just want to subdivide this thing one more time, and you can do that a couple different ways. If I go into the polygon menu set here, we can go to edit mesh, insert edge loop tool, and I want to open that up and make sure that it's set to the default. And if I went in here and I just started inserting loops, turn off my soft selection, we could go down the entire mesh and subdivide this guy to get the right number of edges in order to model the rest of our detail into our model. But I just want to show you what happens here. But the problem with doing this way is that if I go ahead and smooth this guy off, so I'm going to hit the 3 key to do that, we can see here, if I turn off, that we have these kind of artifacts here where everything has kind of, you can see them pretty clearly right here. There's this line that runs right down the thumb. There's another one. There's one all the way down the side of the finger. And these are basically artifacts from adding the extra edges. Now I could fix this by entering the Sculpt geometry tool, so paint, sculpt, and I could go in and smooth all these out, but honestly that would take me a considerable amount of time to get that done. So what I instead want to do is I'm just going to undo all those edge loops that I put in there. And this is only going to work in this case because I need to subdivide everything uniformly for the entire mesh. Alright? So because I need an extra set of edges at all the faces in my model, I can do this operation, which I'm about to do. So I'm going to go into polygons menu set here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a smooth to it. Actually, I don't want to use the graphical user interface here. I'm going to actually do it through the menu set. So I'm going to go to polygons, edit mesh, or I'm sorry, mesh, smooth, and I'm going to just go ahead and smooth that baby out. And what it did is it just simply subdivided every single face in my entire model, and that's exactly what I wanted. Alright, now that I've done that, I actually have enough detail in the model to enhance some of the areas that I want to enhance. So that fold there of skin at the thumb for the webbing of the thumb, basically I didn't have enough edges previously in order to get that nice crease. So if I wanted that nice crease there and that nice fold of skin, now all I would have to do is go in here, and I'm just going to do this kind of an exaggerated fashion so that I can demonstrate how you would do this rather than have it actually look good. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this down. So if I wanted that nice fold there at the crease of the palm and the webbing of the thumb and index finger, I just go and I move these edges closer together, and then if I smooth it out here, you can see that we get a nicer pinch on that, and then I could just go around and do that for the whole way, and I'm able to do that now that I have enough edges. All right, so that's one way to do it. I'm going to undo all these. You could also come in here and start adding the tendon down the back of the finger. And although this is still the very minimum number of edges you would need to do this, the edges are available to you now. So you go like that, and now we have a tendon running down the back of the finger. Again, exaggerated just so you can see what's going on. Problem with this tendon though is that this edge runs down the back of the finger, but the tendon, once it hits the knuckle here, actually starts to taper off towards the center of the wrist. Now that's a problem in designing your mesh, because if you taper those vertices back there at the back of the wrist too much, then you're actually going to have kind of an odd shape and a weird shape for your wrist as well as for your character setup and character rigging later down the road. So yeah, so it's a bit of a problem. So and it's a problem that I can show you how to resolve once we get into displacement mapping. I also want to show you some other techniques. So we have pulling points, which we're well aware of. We can also, I want to introduce you guys to the soft selection tool. So let's say that I wanted to do that exact same operation that I just did, and this time I'm going to go all the way around here. So I want to add that flap of skin there at the webbing of the thumb and index finger. But this time I'm going to go ahead and do it, and I'm going to enter it the soft selection tool by hitting the B key. And you'll notice here that when I hit the B key that we get this kind of yellow, those vertices that I just selected turn yellow. The ones immediately next to it turn red, and then it kind of falls off. And what that's doing is that's telling you that these are influences of the soft selection tool. So when it's yellow, they're 100% influenced. When they're red, it's probably something like 50% or 75%, and so on and so forth, and it just falls off from there. You can also adjust this by, you enter it by hitting B, and you can also adjust it by holding down the B key and just dragging with your right mouse button to expand or de-expand the selection influence area. Okay, so this tool is pretty nice because now that I have the soft selection enabled, now when I move those vertices, they're moving the neighboring vertices along with it, which is pretty convenient. And then now if I go ahead and scale it down here, although I'm going to get kind of an odd scale there because the center of my scale tool is based on the selection area. Let's see if I go into enter, insert, and no, it's not going to let me do it. I was going to try to rotate my my insert selection, but it wouldn't let me do it. It does for some things, not for that tool. So we can scale those down, and if you wanted to, we could move these in. And for these, I'd probably turn off the soft selection and move those all forward. I could rotate those, move those forward. Go into the top view here, rotate those a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing from the bottom here. Just going to grab these. Again, I'm not really trying to model this so much as I am just trying to introduce you to some different techniques. So now I have all those vertices kind of bunched up together. If I hit the 3 key for my sub D smooth, we've got a much nicer pinch there, kind of naturally how it is on a human hand. But we have these weird transitions here. So, and those are a little bit problematic, right? Well, I could get rid of those by going in and pulling all these vertices one by one, but that might take me a long time. So what I want you to do is check out a little tool here called the Sculpt Geometry tool. So if I right click on my mesh, I can go to Paint, Sculpt, and it enters me into the Sculpt Geometry tool, which is really nice. And I want to just show you how this works. So basically you have the following operations available to you. You have push, pull, smooth, relax, pinch, and erase. We're going to focus pretty much on push, pull, smooth, and relax during this tutorial, and we'll get deeper into this tool later. We have the radius here, which is where you can change the brush size. So higher radius is a higher brush, bigger brush, and a smaller radius is a smaller brush. You have opacity, which is basically changes the intensity of the tool. You can leave that all the way up to 1. See, if I do that, I'm going to get a straight influence of 1. If I pull this thing down to a low level, when I do it, it's not going to influence that much at all. We also have a max displacement value. This is kind of nice if you don't want your mesh to move any farther than this number. Seam and pull tolerance, not really quite sure what that does, so we'll leave that alone. One thing that is really great about this tool is that it could be hard to model using this thing if the wireframe was always displayed the way it is. So what they give you is this little tab down here at the bottom, which is display, and it allows you to turn off or on the wireframe of the model that you're working on. That's really nice. So I like to toggle back and forth, and I'll show you how that works a little bit. So right now I want to smooth out this area without pulling points. Alright, so it's going to be super easy for me because I'm in the super easy to use Sculpt Geometry tool, and I'm just going to go into smooth mode, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit these areas, and you'll notice here that I'm hitting these areas, but it's not really smoothing that much. And the reason for that is because previously, as I was showing you this, I changed the opacity down, so the strength of this tool is very light because the opacity setting was very light. So you can mainly just leave that at 1 for the most part. And I want to show you some hotkeys basically to help you when you're using this. So you can see here that I just changed the brush size without going over here and changing it. And the way you do that is just by holding down the B key and dragging left and right. Okay, so that's pretty nice. So I can sit here and smooth the mesh by changing the brush size. The other thing you want to take a look at here is if I go into operation and I'm going to go into push, see this purple little line here, and that's basically your distortion vector, and it's telling you how far by the length of it and in which direction it's going to go. Right now it's constrained to the y-axis, so it's pointing straight down. If I were to change this to normal, you can see here that as I move over the surface, it's moving with the surface normals, so to face the same direction. For this tutorial, we want to go ahead and use normal, so I'm going to leave it on normal. And Notice here that I'm in push mode right now, so if I pushed it in. But if I hold down the control key, it'll go from push to pull, and it'll just switch on a dime. So I can switch back and forth without having to toggle push or pull here over in the interface, which is really nice. And then if I hold down the shift key, you can see that it turned from PS to SM, which is smooth. And now we've got a really fast and easy way to smooth this mesh. Oops. Okay. And that's pretty much it. So there is one more. I usually just park it in push mode, and then control to switch it to pull, shift for smooth, and then the vector you can change by holding down the M key and scrolling left or right, and then I'll change how far the mesh is going to distort. So if you'll notice here, when I do that, it's also changing the max displacement value automatically, which is pretty nice. Alright, and then when you do that, it'll only distort that much. As far as the brushes go, I really like to use the soft brush. This is the softest brush, this one is the second softest, this is a hard brush, and this one is just a solid brush. You can also import your own custom brushes, which are pretty nice, and I'll show you how to do that a little later on. Not in this lecture, but another lecture. Okay. So at this point, I want to turn the wireframe on again, and I want to try this pinch feature. So remember how I was trying to get that nice little crease there at the folds of the skin? Well, you can see here that if I go along here and do this pinch using the pinch tool, what it allowed me to do here is get that nice pinch. So I kind of overdid it, but I really just wanted to show you that. So basically I could have stopped a little bit ago, but this tool would allow you to basically do a lot of stuff that would take you a long time otherwise, and do it really fast. So it's just another another trick up your sleeve, basically. The more you have, believe me, the better off you are. I'm just going to smooth that out. Whoops. And on the smoothing, sometimes I'll try to find a hotkey for this, but I don't have it just yet. I like to change the opacity down to a lower level so that the smoothing isn't so intense, basically. Alright, and then you can just jam that back or set it at 50%, whatever you want to do. It's up to you. Alright, so we did some pinching here, and here I'm just kind of doing it more interactively. Whenever I use the pinch tool, though, I always want to look at it in the wireframe mode, because it also allows you to help set your brush so that you're only influencing the rows that you want to influence. Alright, so let's keep going. Park this thing at push mode. And we can go around here, and we could do the same thing for the creases here. So if I wanted to go ahead and pinch those in at the base of the fingers to define that webbing a little bit more. You could also use the pull. So I'm going to scale my brush down here, and let's say I wanted to pull those points out right there. I would just hold down the control key and go right along there to exaggerate that a little bit more. Then I could use my brush here to go into pinch mode, pinch those together, and then scale it all down and smooth it all out. Oops, I over smoothed it. Smooth it all out. There we go. Another thing you can do here is, remember we have those we have the tendons down the back of the hand. So rather than going in and pulling points, you may just want to use this thing kind of in a surgical fashion. Notice I have the wireframe on, and I'm going to flip it up, and I just want to go down the back of the hand right on that edge and move those verts without having to go in and actually pull them. So it's much faster than having to select all those vertices one at a time. And then all I have to do, if I want to fade it in, is just hold down the shift key, and I can smooth that right back in. So let's just go ahead and do another one of these. I'm going to go ahead and, oops, control key so that I'm pulling instead of pushing. I go down the back of the hand, And then I want to fade. I want a nice transition between these, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to do a little smoothing just at the front and the back of it to give myself a nice transition. Okay, and now we have the hint of the tendons. I want to undo that because I'm actually going to favor a different technique for adding that later. Okay, so that's the Sculpt geometry tool and the soft selection, and we're all familiar with pulling points, alright? So you can use this baby to, you could also use it to add the pads at the bottom of the hand, the fingers. One other area where it's kind of useful is if I wanted to fatten up my fingers. So if I wanted to do that, much easier to do it this way than it is to pull points, in my opinion. So I go to Paint, Sculpt, and I'm going to increase my brush size here. And I'm in push mode, and I just want to fatten up the base of these fingers. So I would go ahead and hold down the Control key, and I just go around the edges of this thing. There, that's probably too extreme, so I would change my vector by holding down the M key and dragging, and then I'm going to do Control, and let's say I want to just meaty up all the areas of my hand really quickly. So it's just kind of using this thing rather than going and pulling the points. Once you get used to it, can actually be very, very beneficial, and actually makes modeling kind of enjoyable for certain things, actually, when the tool's working, of course. Okay, so I'm just going to go in and fatten up all these fingers. I'm holding down the Control key here, just adding some meat in there, and the meat in there. These are kind of the areas of my hand where they get the meatiest. Or if you just want to add some variation to your mesh, to you know, give it a little bit more of an organic look. You know, the more variation that an organic model has, if it's done correctly, usually the better it looks. So there we go. I just wanted to meeting up all my fingers, and that was very quick. So, and I didn't have to pull a single point, which is awesome. All right. So I may have overdone it, and you know, we could obsess over that later. But in this case, I'm just going to say it's a success because I really just want you to know how to use it all. So there we go. I'm going to go pull again here. Let's say I wanted to meeting up my pads of under my hand. I could do that. And this thing is pressure sensitive too. So if you have a tablet, you can get a lot more subtler effects, and it's a little bit easier to use if you like tablets. I've gotten pretty good at making my mouse do my bidding, so I don't really use tablets that much. Anyway, so there we go. We added some detail of the pads. We meeted up our fingers, and now at this point I want to go ahead and get into displacement mapping. So before we get into any sort of mapping, the first thing that we need to do, I'm going to go ahead and close the Sculpt geometry tool, is we need to assign texture coordinates to our model. And in Maya, what those are called are UV coordinates. Other programs can call them by different names. They're called S&T sometimes, I believe, and I think it's RenderMan. Don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. Or just UV coordinates. So I just noticed here that my thumb got wonked out somehow, and it's killing me. And I'm trying to avoid the urge to fix it. But I want to fix it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to show the power of the soft selection by selecting my verts. and then hitting the B key for soft selection. And then I want to go into my rotate tool. I'm going to change the axis here. And then I just want to fix this thumb a little bit. I don't know how it got bent like that. And I just got to orient myself to a view here, so there we go. E, insert, and now I want to rotate it. Ah, there we go. That looks better. Okay. Well, I don't have it perfect, but I don't want to spend all day doing that, so I'm going to move on. Okay, so we want to assign some UV texture coordinates to our model, and we're going to do that through a tool here under the polygon menu called Create UVs, Planar Mapping. I'll just open that up. So basically the way I like to use this is to do planar mapping, fitting projection to the bounding box. I like to do it project from camera, and then I always want to make sure that keep image with height ratio is checked, and insert projection before deformer is also checked. Alright, so in this case what I want to do here, oh no. Okay, so buggy Maya just crashed on me. At least you know you're not alone. It crashes on everyone. So I hadn't trashed my preferences in a good long time, and I did that, and it looks like that solved the problem. So let's keep going here. Here we got my hand mesh, and again I'm just going to go ahead and, this was before I added the subdivide to it, so I'm going to go to mesh, smooth, and go ahead and add that. Before I do that though, what I do want to do is I want to make a copy of it, so I just hit Control D. I'm going to assign that copy to a new layer, and now I'm going to go ahead and smooth this mesh here, and then I'm going to delete the history because I want to commit the changes on this one, and I don't want that smooth input to be causing problems, as I suspect it may have just there even. So I'm going to go ahead and select this mesh. I've added a smooth to it. I want all this extra geometry now. And now I'm going to go ahead and just commit and bake the changes. So I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History, and that's just going to go ahead and bake that smooth into my mesh so that I can't unsmooth it anymore. Alright, so now we want to apply some texture coordinates to this model. And again, we're going to do that using the Create UVs Planar Mapping button here. And we're going to start using a window here called the UV Texture Editor. And right now, if I open this thing up, you can see here that it's blank. And we've got these 4 quadrants here, and then we got this gray quadrant. And the gray quadrant is essentially the active space. It is often called a 1-to-1 UV space. Hence the, if I zoom in here, you can see a 1 and a 1. So it's a square space, and basically what it is it's kind of like a bearskin rug, where like an animal hide has been ripped off the animal and cut down an axis and then stretched out and laid flat. That's essentially what a UV coordinate does to your three-dimensional model. So let me put that away for a second. This will become a little bit more clear now. I'm going to go into my top view here. I'm going to change the shading from X-ray to regular old shaded view. And I'm going to go ahead and go into the Create UV Planar Mapping dialog. And I'll pull this up here, and I'm just going to reset it first. And you want to change it to, this is the default settings, you want to change it to bounding box, no, that's already set. Project from camera, click camera, and then click the box that says keep image height ratio, and then say apply. And once I did that, you can see here that we get this little manipulator, and what that is that's the UV projection manipulator, which we're not really going to touch. We're going to leave it alone. And now if I expand the window here, we can see that my model now has something available to it inside the UV texture editor, and that manipulator is still showing. So if I deselect off the mesh, that manipulator will go away, and we can just see the coordinates here, which use the top orthographic viewport to project onto my mesh. Alright. So the problem with this is that if I go to UV as my selection, and I select this, if I select this UV right here, and I'm just going to try to illustrate something, you can see here that in 3 dimensions, this UV is on the top of my finger, right? Well, the UV editor is a 2-dimensional editor, and it really doesn't understand 3 dimensions. It's only X and Y basically, or in this case it's U and V space. So what you have to do is you have to make everything into a 2-dimensional space. I'm going to select the vertex below it, and if I open up the UV editor, you can see here that both of these UVs are basically right on top of each other. So that would mean that the bottom of that finger and the top of that finger would be sharing the exact same coordinates, 2-dimensional coordinates, for the 2D image space. And that's kind of a no-no. So what we have to do is we have to actually separate these out so that we have a top and a bottom, so that the software can map the top and the bottom separately. Right now, if I put a texture map on this model, what would happen is the top and the bottom would have the exact same texture map because they were sharing the exact same UV coordinates. That may not make sense right now. It will after you work with these for a little bit. You'll start to understand it. For now, you just have to take my word for it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize that view. But what we want to do to solve that is I'm going to go into object mode, and then I'm going to go into edge mode, and I'm going to double click. What I want is the seam right around the side of the hand. And if you'll remember, I told you to put things in very specific places, and the reason for this is you're going to see right now that when you select this edge loop all the way around the hand, it's kind of in the ideal spot for you to break this thing in two for a UV coordinate. Alright, so we have the edge selected all the way around the hand. Now what I want to do is go into the UV texture editor menu. So notice this UV texture editor has a menu separate from the menu up here. So it's almost, if you want to think of this UV texture editor almost as if it's its own program, because it essentially is. So it has all its own stuff, its own menu set. It's kind of like a program inside of Maya in itself. So we're going to go to the polygons menu under the UV texture editor, and we're going to say cut UV edges. And what that's going to do is, if I pull this to the side, it's going to break this thing into 2 halves. So if I go to UV mode here and I just click on one of the UVs on the top of my mesh, and then I go over here to the UV editor, and I'm going to zoom in on that vertex that or UV that I selected. If I right click, I can say select shell, and what that's going to do is, if I pull this off, is notice how it selected only the UVs on the top of my hand. That's great, because now that we have that shell selected, I can hit the W key and I can go ahead and move that shell right off the top of the other one, and now what we have is the top and the bottom of the hand with 2 separate texture spaces, which is what we want. Okay, so I told you that you can see these 1 and 1s in this gray space, and that this is essentially the live space of the UV editor. So what that means is that anything you want to receive a texture map basically has to be inside of the space. Anything that's off to the side here is basically not going to be a live valid and texturable coordinate. Although it is a UV coordinate that is assigned, when you do assign a texture, only the stuff that's in this pane here is going to actually receive the texture map. So you're going to have to forgive my performance of my graphics card here. I still have not found the right driver from ATI, or it's not ATI anymore, it's AMD, to work well with my UV texture editor here. So we're waiting and waiting and waiting, and I hope this thing doesn't crash. It wasn't actually this slow a little bit ago, even minutes ago. So I hope we're not in a situation here where I'm going to have another fatal error. Nope. Okay, good. So I'm going to go ahead and move these guys, and then I'm going to uniform scale them, and I want them to inhabit the gray area. Okay, so remember that anything that's not in the gray area will not receive a texture map once you assign it. Alright, so this gets a lot more advanced than what I've done here. I'm going to kind of do a simplified version for you, and we're going to work this out later after you guys really get into. I want you to do it once, kind of imperfectly, and then I'm going to show you how to perfect these as the class goes on. So we have our UVs assigned now. We've got them on the active texture space. Now we're to a position where we can go ahead and actually start texture mapping our model. So in order to do that, what we want to do here is we want to first extract this kind of roadmap here, and we're going to make it into a format that Photoshop will understand, so we can create a texture map in Photoshop that will basically, we know exactly where it's going to be positioned on our model in Maya. So the way we're going to do that is through the UV texture editor. If you go to polygons, UV snapshot, this little window will pull up, and it's got a little path here as to where it's going to save this file. The default is whatever your working directory is / images, and then the file name is out.uv. Some people are having some trouble with that. If that ever happens, you can just change it to something else. So if you're trying to save this in a location and you get a little message down here that says, morning Maya can't save it, just change the path to something else and try it again. So I'm going to go ahead and use my texture size of 4096 by 4096. Just so you guys know, standard texture map sizes these days are film resolution 8196. 8192 by 8192. Then the step down from this is 4096 by 4096. That's actually a quarter of the size of 8192 by 8192. And then we have 2048 by 2048, which is a quarter of the size of 4096 by 4096. These also go by the names 2K for 2048, 4K for 4096, and 8K for 8192. The lowest you guys ever want to go, unless you're developing for a game, is 1024 by 1024. And for everything I build, I stay either here at 4096 or 8192. So, I actually have some texture maps though that go as high as like 30,000 pixels by 30,000 pixels, but we're not going to even get into that stuff. Alright, so leave it at 4096 by 4096. I'm going to accept the default path, and I'm just going to say OK. And then Maya, go ahead and it saves an image of this to a file. Let me make sure I save that in the right format. I did not want to save that as a Maya IFF. I wanted to save that as a, you can do either a PNG or a TIFF. I'll do a PNG because we're going to use PNGs for displacement mapping. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now we're going to go ahead and open up Photoshop. And I'll pull it over here. And we want to go ahead and open up that image that we just did. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the location. It's going to be in the images directory, and there it is, out UV. Going to go ahead and open that up, and we can see here that you can't see anything, and that's because the it just saved the wireframe in PNG format, and it places it in a material or a image that already has a zero background. So all I'm going to do here is just create another background. I'm going to change my background and foreground color. So I want the background color to be black. And when I do that, I'm going to hit Control A for select the entire canvas. And I'm going to hit Control Backspace to fill the canvas with black as my background. Once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Shift S because I want to save this image. And I'm just going to call this Maya human hand UV _01. Alright? And I'm going to save this now as a Photoshop PSD. And I'm going to save it. Okay? And then I'm going to do one more thing, and then I'm going to save it again. I want to change the image mode to be 16 bits instead of 8-bit. And I can demonstrate the importance of that here in 1 second. So I'm going to change it to 16-bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and save it out again. And I'm just going to go ahead and overwrite that other one. The reason why I'm using a 16-bit image instead of an 8-bit image, I'll show you, is because displacement maps use grayscale images, which means there's no color channel. It's just using the gray channel, which essentially every digital image is made up from a red, green, and a blue channel. Each one of those channels in an 8-bit image have 255 colors available to them. And when you combine them all, then you end up with the ability to have 16 million colors, right? Well, if you were doing a grayscale channel in 8-bit, that would mean that you would only have 255 values of gray available to you. So I'm just going to go ahead and create, I'm going to create two images here. One I'm going to do as a RGB 8-bit image, and I'm just going to use a ramp here, which is going to go from black to white, and I'm going to make that, and now I want to make another image, and this one I'm going to call 16-bit, and I want to go to image mode. I'm going to change it to 16-bit, and I'm going to go ahead and create another ramp here. Alright, now that we have, I should have called the untitled one here is essentially 8-bit. Should have named it 8-bit before I did this, but oh well. So now I'm going to go to the 8-bit image, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Control L for levels, and now I'm going to crush the values from black to white into a very small space of, say, 30 different values. And when I do that, if I zoom in on this, you can see here all this, oops, before the pixel display comes on, all this banding and noise, alright? And I hope you can see that with the video compression after this thing gets compressed, but look at all that noise. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to this image, which is the 16-bit. I'm going to hit Control L, and I'm going to scrunch all those values down into that exact same 30 values. So I'm going to take 255 values, or in this case 1024 values, and I'm going to scale them down into 30 values, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now look at the difference when I zoom in on this one. So I'm going to just before I get to pixel level display, and there's really no noticeable banding on this one, but on the 8-bit image there is noticeable banding. Alright, so that's basically because the 16-bit image has 1024 values and the 8-bit has 255. So it's just a limitation of the 8-bit image, and when it comes to displacement mapping, you just always want to work at a 16-bit at a minimum. More if you can. I believe ZBrush will save, I don't even know what it is, 32 or even 64-bit grayscale maps. But Photoshop kind of stops being useful after 16 bits, so we're just going to stay at 16. Alright? So now that we have our image laid out here, and we have our texture, what we need to do is we need to start basically making our displacement map. Alright? So we can do it a number of ways. You can just go ahead and start painting. So why don't I use something like those troubling tendons on the back of the hand as my reference here. So in a displacement map, black is going to be 0 effect and white is going to be 100% effect. So if I go ahead and paint a line here, so let's go into the paintbrush tool, and white is my default, and so let's say I just want this tendon to run down the back of my hand and this one to run down the back of this hand, and I'm going to just do these very ugly at first so that we can illustrate how this works. So we have black or white, so black is going to be no effect, white is going to be 100% effect. And now I want to do those, I want to draw some lines over here on the other side in different shades of gray. Alright? So I'm going to do, we got one in white, and then let's just do another one at, say, around 2/3 gray. Oops. And then I'm going to do another one and say, I meant to say 3/4 gray, and now I'm going to do 2/4 gray. And then I'm going to do another one. Well, I won't do black, I'm going to go almost black so that we can see the difference here. Alright, so now I got my 3 lines there, and I'm going to go ahead and hide my hand. And I just want to go ahead and save this texture, so I'm going to do Control-Shift-S for save a copy. And I'm going to save this thing as a PNG, and the reason for that is because PNG, the format itself inherently handles high bit depth images, so and that means images of 16-bit and higher. I believe you can even save a PNG up to like 64-bit. So bit depths can be a little confusing too, so I'm not going to try to explain that, but I may have just had a misnomer based on how bitmaps are, the bit depth and bitmaps are referred to each other differently for different programs. So alright, so now that I've done that, I just want to hide my hand here. So before I apply this map to the hand, I want to just go ahead and create a polygon primitive plane, and I'm going to subdivide this thing like 100 by 100, and I just want to show before we put it on anything complex how displacement mapping works. So I have my little plane here, and I want to assign a new material, so assign new material, and I'm going to do a blend, and we have all the normal stuff, you know, color, etc. But if we click on the shading group here, so blend 2 is my material. If I click on the shading group in the attribute editor, you can see here under shading group attributes we have a little box here for displacement material, and it's empty. So that's where your displacement map goes, and if I click on the little checker square there here, I can link it up to a file texture, so I'm going to do that. So I'm going to go over here and say create render node, and I'm going to use file, and there we go. It's created my displacement node. It's got all this information here which we're just never really going to edit. And if I go to the file 5, which is the texture map that it wants me to use as a displacement node, I'm going to navigate to the texture map that I just created, which is the Maya human hand PNG file, and now it's assigned to it, and you'll notice this little sample icon always shows up here as blank. If you click it once, Maya will update it with the texture map. I think it's just like a optimization thing, where by default it'll put that little standard icon in there to basically save you some CPU time, and then you just know that all you have to do is click it if you actually want to see the image on there. Now below here is the reload button, so anytime you save this map out of Photoshop and reapply it, you need to hit reload, and it's going to load the new version every time. Alright? So I'm going to just go ahead and render this out right now so that we can see what's up. And we're going to use the Maya renderer at first, and then once we get comfortable with displacement mapping, we're going to start using the mental ray renderer. Okay, so here we have that. This is the displacement representation of the texture I just made. So let me get a little bit better angle, but here you can see on the other side where I did those tendons just as 100% white, you can see that all those are displaced the same amount, 1 unit up, all uniformly. But then over here we have the grayscale map where I did 1 at 100%, 1 at 3/4, 1 at half, and 1 at 1/4, and we got this nice little stair step down. Alright, so what that should tell you is that each value of gray will basically represent a distance in the software. So, and I can illustrate that even further by taking my little plane here. So what I just did there was I rendered the displacement map. You can also create geometry from your displacement map right inside of the program. And you do that by selecting your mesh, and you just go to Modify, Convert. So Modify under the Polygons menu, Convert, Displacement to Polygons. Okay. Now when I do that, the system's gonna. It'll seem like the system is hung. It's not. Doesn't look like it's doing anything, and then all of a sudden, boom, this panel will show up here, and we've got this now basically the same mesh that we had before, except for now it's actually a piece of geometry. So we can see here, these are the 4 white bars that I made, and then here's the stair step. And if I go into my orthographic view here, you can see that setting of white currently will distort the mesh 1 unit. Alright, so that's pretty cool. We also notice here that there can be some faceting and some artifacts, and that's basically a limitation of the Maya renderer to generate the displacement map. And again, you shouldn't be so worried about that at the first stages of this, because we're going to solve all that by using the mental ray renderer later after we get used to these. Right now we're just trying to make this quick and get you guys up to speed on how to use this thing. Alright, so here we have my mesh again, and I want to show you something else. So if I right click on the mesh and I say Material Attributes, and now I want to go to the Blend Shading Group, and the way you change the distance for how high the mesh will distort, or how much the mesh will distort, it's kind of in a weird, not intuitive place. So you do it by going to your material. So in this case it's Blend 2, and then under the Blend 2 shader group and the displacement material, if we go to that file here, file 5, which is also right up here, but we'll do it by going through here, file 5, under this tab right here called Color Balance, this is where you change the height of your displacement material, and it uses this little value right here, alpha gain, in order to do that. So if I change the alpha gain to something smaller, like a 0.5, and I go ahead and say Modify, Convert, Displacement to Polygons, and it'll take a little while, you can see here that now this file displaced, but it only went half a unit. Alright, and if I want to illustrate this even further, I could, let's just go ahead and hide this layer. So I'll make a layer here and hide it. And now I'm going to go into Material Attributes again, Blend 2. I want to click up the chain here. These little icons will go up or down, the input connections. In this case I wanted to get to file 5. So I'm going to go to Displacement Material, file 5. And this time I'm going to change that alpha gain to 2. And I'm going to go to Modify, Convert, displacement to polygons, and boom, now the max displacement is 2 units. Alright, and so if I go ahead and unhide the other one and turn on wireframe, if I zoom in, we can see here the difference between the two. Alright, so basically there's the smaller one inside at 0.5, and notice it's a quarter of the height of the one that was at 2. Alright, so now let's get rid of those. And then the other thing to know also is that the displacement map will also expand your mesh out from its original surface. So if you don't want something to be expanded out from the original surface, you need to give it a color of black. Alright, so now that we have we kind of understand the inner workings of displacement mapping a little better, let's show you one more thing. So the way that you can increase the resolution of the generated mesh is by selecting the mesh and going into the attribute editor for the mesh. So you can just select the mesh and hit Control A or click the attribute editor tab. And under render our displacement map, the initial sample rate is basically where you do that for the Maya renderer. So if I change this from the default of 6 to 12, so let's say you're using displacement map, but you're getting a bunch of artifacts, and it's basically looks like it's not high enough resolution to capture the subtle features that you have. You're going to need to go in here to the displacement map under the attribute editor and change the initial sample rate to something higher. So if I do that here and I go to modify, convert displacement to polygons, it'll take a little longer. But it'll generate a mesh with a lot higher resolution, and that can be useful later. Alright, so now that we have the inner workings of this pegged down, let's go ahead and show our mesh again. So here's our hand. Now we want to go ahead and use displacement mapping to do some of the subtler features of this mesh without actually having to add geometry. So let's go ahead and do that. What I always like to do is, let's go ahead and go back into Photoshop, is I like to, I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer here because we don't need it anymore. What I like to do is I tend to use photo reference. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my hand reference image that I had, that I actually shot. And it's pretty high resolution. If we check it out, 34 by 48. You can shoot your own reference if you want. You definitely want to shoot something with a lot of specularity. It works the best for this. So now I have my hand, and I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it into my texture map here. And you can see here that my texture map is very large because even though this image is very large, it doesn't fit the whole thing. And I'm just going to scale this texture map to kind of be in position for my hand. And if you notice here that my hand kind of matches my UV space, that wasn't by accident. I actually went in, and when I scaled my hand to fit the proportions, I actually did it to this image. Alright, so now that I have this hand in here, what I always like to do is, before you do any manipulations to anything, I just make a copy of it so that if I ever wanted to get back to that spot, I could do that. And what I want to do is I just want to go in here and start erasing this image. I could even use my lasso tool here. I think I'm going to do it that way. And I'm just going to go ahead and, what I'm doing is I grab the lasso, and if you hold down the control key, it allows you to just keep dropping points along whatever it is you're selecting. And I just want to make a quick mask basically to get rid of all this background that I basically don't need. Okay. And then I'm going to say, so I got my little mask drawn out here, and then I'm going to go to select, inverse, and I'm going to hit Control X to delete all that gray that I just don't want. Alright, so now we've got my little hand texture map here, and I just am checking right now to see if it lines up pretty well. It lines up reasonably well, so I'm not going to obsess over it like I would if I were actually modeling. Right now I'm lecturing, so okay, so I want to reduce my brush size, and I just want to erase that little white line that I didn't get rid of before, and same thing there. That's fine. Okay. Alright, so now what we want to do is I have my little color image, and it lines up reasonably well, so I'm not going to obsess. And again, I'm going to use this image, but right now I want to keep the color version. So I'm going to create a copy, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control, Shift, and U, and what that is the keyboard shortcut in Photoshop to desaturate my image and basically remove all the color information from it. Okay. And then I've got a finger here that's kind of not lining up, so I'm going to just go ahead and Control Copy it, Control V, and just move it over there a little bit. And then I might go into the eraser, increase my brush size, and then just kind of erase that out. So I just moved that over a little bit. Alright, so I've desaturated this image, and I basically want to use it alone as kind of my displacement map. So if you'll remember, displacement maps work with white and gray values, and a white value will displace up, and a gray or black value will move it down. Well, this is already kind of fitting that profile somewhat, right? If I were going to do the knuckles here, basically I've got dark and I've got light, so that should already kind of be close to what it is I need. So I'm going to go ahead and save this out by default, just by changing it to black and white, and I just want to see what we get. So I'm going to go to Save, and again I want to do PNG, and I'm just going to overwrite that human hand text that we already made. Let's say OK. Alright, and now that it's saved, I'm going to go over in here to Maya, and I'm going to go to Material Attributes, and I'm going to track down that material. Somehow it went back to Lambert 1, so I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to say Assign Existing Material, and I want it to go to Blend. Alright, so I'm going to go Material Attributes. Oh, I know, I never assigned that texture to this hand. Alright, so I've assigned the existing material blend to the hand, and we have the displacement material map 5. And if you'll notice here, the sample is the old map that I just overwrote, so I have to say reload to get it to update. And now I have the new displacement material, which I just made, and we're just going to go ahead and see how we did, what that even looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and render it out. And we're probably going to get something that looks pretty ridiculous, and that's okay, that's what I wanted. I'm going to pause it while this renders. Okay, and so the result of that is we get something that kind of looks like a stuffed animal. And although this is cool, this is nothing what we wanted. So I was just trying to demonstrate what would happen if we just left it alone and brought it in here and rendered it. So what we need to do now is we need to tweak this a little bit. So I want to go to the material attributes, file 5, and remember I had my alpha gain set to 2, so that's a max displacement of 2 units. That's pretty ridiculous. What you want to do is you want to kind of plan out with your displacement map what is the highest distance you want to go to use to feature off of your mesh. And then you're going to kind of set your alpha gain to that value. So I may want to do some like tendons in my hand, and I might want to do some veins in the back of my hand, and then I'm going to do micro detail, which is much less than that. And I'm basically going to set this value to the highest, the farthest dimension of detail that I'm going to put into this map. So in this case, I think 0.4 is going to be a good value, and I'm going to go ahead and just render that again, and we're going to get a little bit different result. Okay, so we can see here, though, although this is still very noisy and not what we want, we're actually getting into a realm here. So if you look here, you can see the distance that the distortion is occurring off the mesh, and then we're starting to get some details that we actually are interested in, like the folds of the wrinkles in the hand and whatnot. Although this is just way too noisy at this stage in the game, we're going to basically show you how to fix this. So we're getting closer now, and the way we're going to fix this is by basically just making the effect more subtle using the texture map in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and go into Photoshop here, and what's happening here is that basically my detail is just way too bright in relation to the black background. So remember in the previous demo, when I wanted something to be low, not have much feature displacement, I needed it to be closer to a black color. So what I can do is very quickly in Photoshop use my opacity here and take it down to something like a let's just do like an 18 or 20%. I'm going to do 10%. And see what I've done here. If I zoom in, I've taken my material, or my texture, which I'm using a displacement material, and I've made the values, if I sample them, so if I use the color picker here, basically closer to black. So I'm getting like 37s and 40s if you look over here. So I have the color picker, and this area over here tells you what value your pixels are at. So we've got a 42, and previously if I left it 100%, I was getting values that were closer to white, which were going to displace that surface to the max, which is not what I wanted. So I just want to bring these down. So I'm going to go down to like 20%, and I'm going to go ahead and just save this again. Alright, and what's going to happen is my displacement material is not going to displace as much because I have a lower gray value. And PNGs with high bit depth just take a little while to save. Alright, that's saved, so I'm going to pop over here. I'm going to go ahead and reload my texture map. See how it changed to the lesser grayscale. I could use the region render if I wanted to render a smaller region. The way that works is you just drag around it and then hit render region. And although it is technically faster than rendering the whole frame, if you have a fast enough computer, the difference is so marginal that I usually just like to render the whole frame. Alright, so now that I took my texture map, my displacement map down in value, see what's happening here? We're getting a much subtler skin detail out of the map than we were previously. I'm going to go ahead and render the whole frame so that you can see what I'm talking about, and I'm going to pause. Okay, now we're getting into a realm here. So we have some subtle skin detail, and we're starting now to get some wrinkles in the hands and whatnot. And now what I want to do is I want to show you how to take a baseline skin material and use it to and then basically start embellishing your own details right on top. Alright? So one thing else though I want to show you before we keep going is, notice how my skin detail can be a little soft in places. It doesn't quite pop that much. One of the reasons for that is because file textures in Maya automatically get assigned a smoothing value in the software under the effects pane here. So we're under the file 5 texture, which is my displacement map. And if I expand the effects tab here, so it's right below color balance where we set the alpha gain or the displacement value for the depth, the filter value here, filter 1, that actually filters it quite a bit, and it actually blurs everything quite a bit. So what I always like to do is either change this to a 0.1, oops, 0.1, or a 0. So we'll just do 0.1, and I'm going to go ahead and render this again. Okay, you might not be able to see it that much with the compression, but it definitely improved the result a little bit. I got a little bit tighter detail on my texture map than I did previously, or my displacement map. Alright, so now that we've done this, I want to just go over to Photoshop, and let's go ahead and start embellishing using painting instead of just what the software is or the program is giving us by default. So let's go ahead and go into Photoshop, and we've got our nice little reference material here, and for the most part I kind of liked where everything was, so I'm not really going to mess with it too much. And what I want to do now is I want to create a new layer. So one of the things that I liked, we liked where everything was, but I could have used a lot more displacement out of areas such as the knuckles and whatnot. You're kind of limited in terms of how good your displacement map is by just using a photograph. So what I want to do is embellish this further by hand. So I'm going to go in here to the paintbrush, and I'm going to get a very small brush. And what I want to do is I'm just going to speed this up. So I'm going to use the shift key to basically just keep drawing in increments of straight lines. And if you'll notice, what I'm doing here is I'm just tracing these ridge lines for the creases in the knuckle. Alright, I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to go around the side here. And then for these smaller ones, I could even make my brush smaller. So I'm going to go down one size. And I'm just going to trace all these. I'm only going to do one of these knuckles because we're going to be able to reuse this once we've made one of them. Which is the beautiful thing about image-based modeling, is that you just don't need to keep building things over and over again like you sometimes have to do in 3D. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and leave that. That's one layer. I now want to do another layer on top of that, and this one I'm going to make a much bigger brush. And this one I'm going to make white. And what I want to do is I want to paint in, that's too big, I'm going to paint in the in-betweens for these folds. And it's probably not really clear to you what I'm doing at this stage in the game, but that's okay. Okay, so there and there, that looks good. Okay, so there's my folds, and they're looking a little weird right now, and I just want to show you a quick technique. You can go to select that, and then you go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and what I can do is I can blur these guys out like so. So Say OK. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me a smoother transition. Alright? And I can do the same thing for the detail creases underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and select them. And I'm going to say Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm just going to blur those out a little bit also. And then what I want to do is I want to go into this white layer, and I want to just start erasing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to use an opacity of, say, like 50%. And that was too much. I want something less. And that's too much also. I'm going to undo out of that. Alright, I'm just going to use a bigger brush and less opacity on my eraser. Let's do like a 5 or something. And I'm just going to go ahead and start blending the transitions as well as some of the details. So by doing this, by stamping this out, I'm going to kind of give my little knuckle displacement kind of some variation. And then I'm going to increase the opacity here. And I really want to almost fade the sides out so that it kind of blends into the skin. Alright. And then I could also put my indentation channel on top of that, and then I'd have a little bit more easy time painting over it and blending it in. You'll get the gist of this once you do it. I'm doing this in almost like a cartoon fashion right now, and if you were doing this for real, once you get the hang of it, you're gonna see how much control you have over how things can look, basically how photoreal things can look. Alright, so that's pretty good. I just want to blend it out from the center to the edges. And I kept it white here because I really want to exaggerate it. So now that I've done this one knuckle, I'm going to go ahead and save this. Again, I'm just going to overwrite that same texture. Alright, and what I want to do now is I want to pop over to Maya, and I want to update it. So I'm going to go to Material Attributes, File 5, Reload. There's my knuckle, shows up. So I'm going to go ahead and render this out again. Okay, I wanted this to happen, so there it is in exaggerated fashion. That's with a value of 1, so it's displacing it up to the max, which is 0.4. But all I need to do to fix this is basically go into my Photoshop file and grab these 2 layers. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of them. I usually make a folder inside my program called like Originals inside of Photoshop, and then that's where I throw all those original layers that I don't want to mess up. Oops, that's fine for now. And then just put them, all the way at the back or something. Okay, so now that I've got my copies here, I'm just going to go ahead and merge these layers. And then now that I've got them merged, all I have to do is change their opacity. And let's say, just as a baseline, I want to use about 40% of that. Alright, that's probably still too much. Let's go to 30. Okay, and then now, because I have it separated as a layer, I'm going to go ahead and reuse it and just rotate it over here, make another copy. The way I did just make a copy was through the shortcut. I hold down the Alt and Shift key, or yeah, Shift keys, and it just makes a copy of my existing layer. And then you can do Control T, and I'm going to rotate this guy. At this point I might want to just vary it slightly, so I could go to image adjustments and then flip horizontal. Easier than that might also just be Control T and just rotate it 180 degrees. And that's fine for now. And then we'll do the pinky. I'll probably have to scale this one down. And there we go. Alright, so now we've got the thumb, even though it has the incorrect orientation. We'll go ahead and do that also. I'm going to select this layer, Control T. For your mapping coordinates, you guys' thumbs are probably off based on the method I'm showing here. Just want you to realize that that's okay for now. I kind of don't have time to show you everything, how to do it professionally yet. Just be aware that the mapping coordinates for the thumb we'll definitely be able to fix later. So that's worth knowing. Alright, so now I have all my knuckles there. I'm going to go ahead and resave this as PNG. I'm going to overwrite the old one. Okay. And there we go. Now I can go back over into Maya, and I'm going to reload my texture. Now we got all 5 knuckles in there, and I'm going to go ahead and re-render. And voila, we're getting closer now. So now we've got all the knuckles with the nice displacement. That actually isn't looking too bad for 5 minutes worth of work. And we got our subtle skin in here. And I just want to demonstrate, so you do the same technique here for the next set of knuckles as well as for under the hand. And then I want to show you basically, remember those pesky tendons that are running down the backs of the fingers, and the edge loops basically don't line up correctly for it? Well, I'm going to show you how to do those also. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Photoshop. And let's just go ahead and paint some tendons. So let's merge all these knuckles we just made. I wouldn't normally do this, so I like to keep things in layers. So if you've got a massive file, I would just recommend keeping it in layers as long as you can before you have to merge everything out. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to get those tendons in. And I'm going to actually use my reference right here. That's about the width of a tendon. I'm going to go a little bit wider. Alright, and I'm just going to draw it. Down the back of the finger. And there we go. Alright, so that obviously, you know that's probably not going to work, right? So we're going to be able to just do our little tricks where we're going to use the opacity here. So I'm probably going to use maybe like a 50%. And the eraser tool. So I'm going to go over here and grab the eraser. Increase my brush size. And I kind of like 15 for this. And I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to add some irregularity in places. They kind of, for my hand, they kind of disappear at the fronts and backs, and then they might also be kind of irregularly shaped in places. as well as they'll usually disappear at the tops of the knuckles and then not show up until the backs of the knuckles, and then they'll just kind of disappear into the fingers here. So I'm going to do that. There we go. That's probably good enough for demonstration purposes. And then I also noticed that I wanted to beef up my skin texture a little bit, so I'm going to take that from 25, that layer, to from 20 to 25. Maybe I'll go a little bit deeper, since the compression is probably going to make this look not quite as good as it could. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and save this again. PNG. Good. At this point, it's probably also a good idea to just save my texture. I'm going to do that, save. It's going to take a while when you have a 4096 map with 16-bit channels and tons of layers. That file is probably going to be, I bet it's around 100 megs by now, if not 200. And that's fine. Hard drive space is cheap these days. So, alright, so we're going to go back to my hand. I'm going to reload that texture map now with the tendons put in there. And I'm going to go ahead and render this puppy out. Okay, we can see here that we've got room to basically make them more pronounced. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So the way we're going to do that is by selecting the layer and changing its opacity. So I'm going to take it up to 100% and save this out. And then reload and re-render it. Okay, so there we go. I just went ahead and tweaked those tendons a little bit better, so you could see they're exaggerated. They don't look quite right, but you can see. All I wanted to demonstrate is that you could do very fine details, such as the skin and the folds, even a fingerprint. I believe with this resolution I could get to a medium level detail, such as the tendons and the veins. You could use this technique to do the veins in the hands, and we've got a pretty convincing knuckle going on here. Alright, so that's good. That'll conclude the displacement mapping portion of this lecture. Let's go ahead and hide this render, and now let's continue on to posing the hand. Alright, so a couple different ways you can pose your hand. The very easiest method would just be brute force, which is just selecting vertices and rotating them. So what I'm going to do here is go into vertex mode. I'm going to use the marquee selection, and I'm just going to select this row of verts here on the other side of this finger, and I actually got it perfectly. And now I want to rotate this finger to pose it, so I'm just going to go ahead and first of all hit the E key to get into rotate mode, and then I'm going to hit the insert key so that I can change the center point of my rotation node. Once I've moved the center to where I want it to be, I hit the insert key again, and notice I have not left rotation mode, so it's going to allow me to rotate that finger down like so and pose it. And basically I would just keep going like this. Notice here though we have there's some strange artifacts, and I want to just see if something works here, so bear with me. I'm going to change the insert, and this time I'm going to try it again, rotating. I'm going to turn on the soft selection. Hello? Okay, so what I did was I first entered into the soft selection. Once I did that, I hit the E key And once I did that, I hit the insert key to move the center point. Forgive me, I've never actually done this technique. I was just kind of doing this on the fly. And then I was able to rotate this using the soft selection. And what it did, it just improved my crumple points there. And that looks pretty good. If you want, you kind of have to manually go in and distort these vertices back. And that's up to you. You can do it that way. This is probably the easiest method for posing, but it's also maybe the more problematic in terms of you move things and then you're going to have to move vertices and stuff and whatnot into place. I also want to demonstrate that one of the cooler things about displacement maps is also that when you do start distorting your mesh, you don't need to worry that you're going to have to redo the map every time you distort it. The maps actually flow along with your model. So there we just go ahead, we went and moved that finger. If I go ahead and render this out here, and I'll pause it for how long it takes to render so you don't have to watch that. So you can see here when I rendered it that after I distorted the mesh that the displacement actually travels along with it and actually naturally pulls the displacement map the same way the knuckle would distort if you actually folded your finger. The only thing you'd have to do, and what is often done, actually this is the way to do it, if you're going to use displacement maps, you would have a second map that basically had less of a height value that you would then fade in when the knuckle folded so that this bump would not be so pronounced. So you'd still have the creases, but the bump would be different. And you could also add in other subtle changes like skin folds or wrinkles or whatever you wanted. So it's very powerful. Okay, so let's close that out. I'm going to go ahead and undo out of this. So that's just pulling points. You can pull points with soft selection enabled also. Another method, which is a little bit more advanced, is the lattice. Alright, so we get lattices in the animation menu set. So I'm going to go up here into the animation menu set, and it's under deformers. I'm going to say create deformers, lattice. Alright, and I'm going to just go ahead and create one. By default, the lattice is kind of created in the most inopportune way, and the way they work is you right click on them and you have a lattice point, and what that does is it allows you to distort the mesh based on the movement of this control point rather than having to actually individually go in and pull all these vertices to move your mesh. You can change how these things are oriented to your model to make them more convenient. One way to do that would be to just go over here into the channel box, and I could increase the divisions. So here I'll do the U divisions, we'll take the T divisions out, and this would essentially allow me to distort this mesh without having to reorient it. But I do want to show you how to reorient them also. So here we go, I got my lattice. I'm going to go into lattice points. And let's say we wanted to bend all these fingers simultaneously. I'm going to just go ahead and get into the rotate mode. I'm going to hit insert to change my pivot point. And we'll put it right there at, like, say, the base of the knuckles. And we'll say insert to get rotate back. And we could just rotate all the fingers simultaneously. Now notice something here, that I'm rotating all these fingers simultaneously, but the thumb is going along with it. And the reason for that is because the thumb is also being influenced by this chain. So the way it works is any part of your mesh that is inside of this bounding box is going to be influenced by it. So you can change that by, I'm going to go into object mode, and if I open up the hypergraph hierarchy and I select both the FFD lattice and its base simultaneously, I can actually move the lattice off of the thumb and have its influence be taken off the thumb, or just one of the fingers. Let's say I want to move those three, or the pinky, or you can kind of see how this works. So Anything that goes inside of the lattice will get the influence, and anything that's outside does not. And then the way to move the lattice is the lattice has the FFT lattice node, but it also has a base node. If you just move the lattice itself, you're going to distort the mesh. But if you grab the lattice and its base, so if I go to Windows, Hypergraph Hierarchy, and I grab the lattice and its base, now I can move the lattice and basically change the way things are influenced based on its position. Okay. So another cool thing about lattices is they are non-destructive, meaning I can delete that and my hand will lay right back down. Or I can bake the changes into my mesh by selecting the mesh, and if I go to Edit, Delete by Type, History, then I baked that transformation right into the mesh. So that's kind of nice. All right. Lattices are incredibly powerful. My advice to you is just start working with them, and you'll understand how great they are. Okay. So that is lattices. They're very useful. Another way that you can pose this hand is by creating a skeletal system. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a very simple, basic rig. Nothing too crazy. And this would allow you to distort the mesh also. So this is probably the most advanced of the techniques that I'm about to show. So I'm going to go to Shading, I'm going to go to X-ray mode, and Animation menu set again. And then I want to go to Skeleton, Joint Tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a joint from here to approximately the crease zone of my wrist. And then I'm going to add an extra bone right here, which is basically where all my metacarpals come into place. And then I'm going to hit Enter, and what that's going to do is, if I go to the Hypergraph Hierarchy, it builds a joint chain of 3 joints, and then it stops right there. The reason I stopped right there is because now I want this to be the parent of the joints that I'm about to draw here. So I'm going to go to Skeleton, Joint Tool. I'm going to click on that first joint, and what that tells the software is make this next joint chain a child of the joint chain that I'm about to draw. So I'm going to go to Knuckle 1, Knuckle 2, Knuckle 3, and then I'm just going to draw one more right out the tip of the finger, and then I'm going to hit Enter to complete that action. Then I'm going to go to Skeleton, Joint Tool again. I'm going to click on that joint right there to tell it I want to build this next chain as a child of that chain. And I got a 1, 2, 3, and 4, Enter. And then I'm going to go to Skeleton, Joint Tool again, click that one to say this one's a child of that one. 1, 2, 3, and Enter. Okay. And then we're just going to do it again. Joint Tool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Enter. Joint Tool one more time. 1. Remember this bone that's hidden down here? I'm going to put that right there. 2, 3, and 4. There we go. And then now all I got to do is go down here and position it. So I'm going to select that first joint in the hierarchy. If we go here to Window, Hypergraph Hierarchy, you can see here that's the first joint in the chain, which means if I just select that joint and move it, all the other joints will move along with it. I'm going to move that up to the center of my finger, my hand. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and go into wireframe mode. I'm just going to, I'm actually going to move these joints for the pinky and the index finger so that they line up with the finger themselves. So that's good. And then I'm also going to do that for the thumb. So we go into shaded mode here. Drop this down. Drop this down. And then I'll go ahead and drop this down and drop this down. Okay. So that my thumb joint is inside the thumb. Again, this gets a lot more advanced than what I'm showing. but this is just basic. If you did this, you'd be able to just get some better poses out of your hand without as much work. Alright, so now that I have my skeleton positioned, what I first want to do before you do a skeleton setup, you always want to freeze your transformation. So I want to first edit, delete by type, history on my hand, and then I want to go to modify, freeze transformations, and freeze the scale of my hand. If you don't have your scale frozen, then when you go and bind the skin, you'll get all sorts of unintended double transformations and whatnot. So just always freeze your transformations. So select the object. First you're going to do edit, delete by type, history, and then you're going to do modify, freeze transformations. The next thing we want to do is select my joints here, select my skin, and then we're going to go skin, bind skin, interactive skin bind. And what this does is it gives you these cool manipulators that allow you to change the way the skin is actually weighted on your surface. So, and it's basically you can select these by first just selecting the joint. So I'm going to go to shading mode here, X-ray joints, so that I can see my joints through my skin. Again, that was shading X-ray joints. So there's X-ray, which on this graphics card works the same. But shading X-ray joints, shading X-ray joints. If I do X-ray, I won't be able to see the joints. If I do shading X-ray joints, then it'll make my surface X-ray so that I can see the joints. Now what these little manipulators allow you to do is change the way that each joint influences the skin. So by scaling this inward, I can say anything that's in red is going to be influenced 100% by this joint, to yellow, which is going to be like 75 to 50 to 25. And you can just scale this thing interactively. Here in this envelope is, if you grab the front of it and move it, it'll move the whole thing. If you hold down the control key, or I'm sorry, the shift key, it'll change just the top part. Alright, so that's kind of cool. And then if you ever want to see how something's going to be rotated, you just simply have to select the joint and then hit E for rotate. We can see here that that's way too much influence on that joint. So if I wanted to get back to the joint influence tool, all I have to do is have that joint selected, click on the little manipulator, and then I could drag this down and change interactively how that mesh is being affected by that joint. So you can get a much smoother transition. Here we're affecting kind of the sides, so there we go. That looks a lot better. And then if I click the next one, if I hit the E key, I can rotate the joint a little bit. We can see here we got some pretty weird effects going on. So again, I just enter into the joint manipulator tool. And I believe what's happening is, see this little crease right here? That's being caused because this manipulator is actually eating into that one. So that's a little bit better. And then now all I have to do is select this one and give it a little bit more influence. Just widen it up. There we go. And I fixed the problem. There we go. That's looking a little bit more like the finger should actually crease. And then we got this little weird transition here, and that's probably because this one is influencing too much. So I can scale that in. And then we've got, see, some of these are exploded out, and what that means is it has no influence. So I have to basically go find that vertex and get it associated to something. Alright, and then if I want to do this one, I go to E for insert and for rotate, and I'm going to rotate that out. Now I can go into the joint manipulator. See that we've got a little bit of over influence going on there. And you just peel it back. There we got. So this vertex here is basically not being influenced by anything. And I don't know where it's coming from at this point. I think I'm going to try to scale it. There we go, I got it. I think it's on the outside here. So I could basically just move this off, and there we go. Scale this down. Okay, that's looking better. So this is a bit of an art form. Not really an art form. It's really just kind of a technique that you'll get used to as you do it more and more. And pretty easy though compared to how this used to be done. And you would just have to go and do that for each individual finger. Basically, you're probably just going to have a pose in mind. Here we go. I found this influence here that's corrupting this, it looks like. So basically, see that little pinch there that was coming up? It was this joint right here had an influence on the pinky, and I found it, and I scaled it off, and there we go. You can use the Sculpt Surfaces tool to kind of paint out any of the artifacts that you have once you've posed your model, and then again the displacement maps are going to follow right along with this. So one thing I do want to show you, so let's say that we've gone through and we've edited all our skin values, and then we want to fix some of the transitions, like here, some of this artifacts and whatnot, and we want to use the Sculpt Geometry tool to do that, to make our lives easier rather than pulling points. The way to do that is, right now we have a skeletal influence on here. You're just going to hit Control D for duplicate, and then if I go to W to move this thing, notice that nothing happens. Oh, there we go. And my manipulator here, I got to scale out for it. If I do the plus and minus keys, I can make the manipulator bigger. There we go. You can see that our manipulator for the mesh is actually grayed out. And the reason for that is because once you bind a mesh to a skeletal system, a bunch of joints or bones, it automatically gets locked. And so the way to unlock it is to highlight all the channels in here, which are blue and grayed out, and you right click on them and you say unlock selected, and then now that channel is unlocked, and I can go ahead and move this mesh off. And now you'll notice that the mesh is no longer influenced by the skeletal chain either. So basically I have no way to pose this any further. This one, however, I can always snap back by selecting all the joints, and notice here the subtle difference. So I marquee dragged around all these joints, and if I go to Window, Hypergraph Hierarchy, you'll notice that even though I dragged around all these bones or joints in the perspective window, it only selected one. So you have to, if you want to select them all, go into the Hypergraph Hierarchy window or the outliner and select them all this way. Once you do that, if I want to get this thing back to its bind pose, I can either do that by highlighting all the rotate values. Oh, and I must have, you know what I did? I accidentally deleted the history off this mesh. Let's see if I can go back with my undo. Okay. So I want to go to Window, Hypergraph Hierarchy. I want to select all these guys, and I want to rotate all my bones back to 0, and my mesh will go right along with it. Okay? And then now if I duplicate this, Control D, and I want to unlock it, I have to highlight all these and say unlock selected, and then now I can move them off, and that pose is baked. And then again, if I want to get this one back to its bind pose, I have to select all those joints, select all the rotate nodes, and go to 0, and I can pose it right back. There is another way, but I'm not going to show it in this lecture. Okay, so then we've got both of them posed, and beauty of it, the whole setup is that the displacement maps will go along with the pose mesh. So there we go. There's our pose mesh. Displacement maps traveled right along with it, as you would expect, and you didn't have to do any additional modeling. So that's pretty much it for this lecture. I don't think I'm missing anything. Oh, I did just want to illustrate, again, if you have these crumple zones and you want to smooth those out, you just go into Paint, Sculpt, and then I like to just use the old smooth, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key and smooth it out. And you can smooth out any transitions that were still pretty ugly. And that's about it. Yeah, that's it. So you've got basically a really great method. You could model just about any photoreal hand and get it posed for sculpting or reference or whatever you want, and be ready to rock. You can really get a lot of detail on this if you spend a lot of time. And honestly, once you set up your Photoshop map correctly for the displacement mapping, it's just way easier to edit the mesh and get really good results without having to do all sorts of extensive modeling that take you probably about 5 times the amount of time. So good luck. Hope to see you guys nail this, and yeah, hopefully you don't have to pause this video too much. Alright, I'll talk to you later.